I should have probably looked at some of these topics, huh, Chris?
You'll do fine.
Yeah.
Brian and Glenn don't read it until 2 minutes before the show anyway, if they read it at all. Otherwise, you just shoot from the hip.
You're a little bitch sometimes while you're whining.
Hello, my friends.
Thank you for joining us for the PEBCAK Podcast, locally information security show featuring some all-around good people. It is week 25 of 2024. I'm Chris Louie, and broadcasting from home, even though we had the three of us all in person together this week. With me, I have my co-host, the Cloud God, who's wearing a sport coat in this 109-degree weather.
Didn't really have a choice about that. You gotta play the part, look the part, I guess, when you're in Vegas. But I will say, it was 67 inside the conference hall, so I was comfortable even though it was 109 outside.
Yeah, that was the crazy part when I had to go out to the other hotel, and it's 67 inside, and the second you go out, it's like walking into an oven. And you're all sweaty when you get to the other place, and then you cool down.
My only critique of this, and I was telling my wife on paper, so for everyone listening, we went to an event called Zenith Live. We had all of our customers from all over the world there, and they decided, like, hey, we're in Vegas. How about we do a pool party from like 6:30 to 10:30, unlimited drinks, unlimited food, loud music, and then this is great on paper until you realize we're dealing with IT dudes that the last thing they want to do is take their shirt off and their pasty white skin in the pool in front of a bunch of strangers. Like, that is not the cup of tea. So I think that was a miss, but that's okay.
Venue was still good, though.
It was. I ended up making my way there. I will say this. So I got there late because I had 2 dinners that I went to. And so I was circling the wagon, and the last person to leave, do you know who it was?
Jay,
yeah. I was there with Jay. I was like, what the hell is Jay still doing here? It was like 10:41, and he's just talking with people, taking pictures. He's so cool.
Customer obsession, Brian. Customer obsession.
Definitely.
Yeah. So funny story about that. I was talking to Jay at one point. We actually were talking about work, and then a bunch of other people came up and were like, "Hey, Jay, can I get a picture?" And all of a sudden, I started becoming the photographer for a lot of those Kodak moments.
Hey, Brad, here's my phone.
Yeah, exactly.
It was funny as I was walking over there. I think I got there literally around 10 o'clock, and I ran into a group of people, and they're like, "Brian, come sit down, have dinner with us." And I looked at the table. I said, "Are there any customers here?" So they're like, "No." I'm like, "No, I got things to do, guys." Just left them hanging.
Mingle with customers.
Yeah,
it's true.
There's a weird voice on the podcast this week, Chris. We should probably introduce him.
You should. Well, first we'll say we do not have Glenn, so there's one missing voice on this podcast since he is working on his tan right now. We will see you next week, Glenn.
All right.
Our guest this week is Brad Moldenhauer, who is a CISO in residence here at Zscaler. We've been trying to get Brad on for a while, and I'm glad we were able to get him on. It was supposed to be live, but we'll take him in Zoom as a second place for that. Brad, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for having me on here, and I can safely say long-time listener, first-time participant here. Mr. Medina has some pretty big shoes to fill, so hopefully I'm up to the task. But yeah, looking forward to the dialogue today, and sharing some more Zenith Live stories. Since I got my set of eyes and what I saw, but 2 more pairs. I'm sure there was some pretty interesting conversations, or maybe even just some funny anecdotal stuff that maybe happened. So, but either which way, looking forward to talking all things cyber with you guys.
Well, real quick, how do you pronounce Hyundai?
I would have said it the same way as you.
Car company. Hyundai.
Say it. No, don't listen to the idiot. How do you say it, Brad?
Hyundai.
That's my boy. You're welcome on the show anytime.
That was the gating factor. If you said it the way I said, he probably would have kicked you out.
Okay, so you know what? Long-time listener, definitely missed that episode.
It's a running joke. And I think Brian would also say Glenn has small shoes literally to fill, but large shoes figuratively.
Agreed. He's like a geisha.
They said it, Glenn, not me.
This week, we're going to talk about a hotel hack, yet another border network device getting hacked. For our third topic, Google pulls an oopsie, and close with stupid lawsuit talk. for our first topic, and this will be our this will be the first of our 2 boneheaded stories of the week.
Ooh, fun.
Self-check-in terminals at many popular hotels are vulnerable to a kiosk mode bypass flaw that could allow access to guests' personal information and the keys for other rooms. So this is very apropos since we just came back from an event where we all had to use those self-check-in kiosks, or if you're smart, you use the app. But if not, you were standing in a really, really long line.
Or you were like me and you do either one of those things. The line was short. I just walked right in and I talked to a human being. So, egg on your face.
Okay, so first anecdote from Zenith Live. So yeah, I was in one of those long check-in lines, and not surprisingly, I knew half the line, because they were there for our event. But I get up there and I check in. Like, oh yeah, hey, we recognize the name, and yeah, you're good to go, and everything's just going swimmingly. And then they're like, we don't have anything quite available. My coworker, Pam Kubiatowski, is right next to me and was right behind me in line since we Ubered over from the airport. And yeah, they checked her into a room just fine. So obviously I'm irate at that point. And give them my number. And we're starting to walk to the conference center, which, typical Vegas hotel, that is not a simple stroll.
It's about 3/4 of a mile.
Oh yeah. And so right when we get to the badge registration there, my phone starts blowing up and I have to go back.
Your room's ready. Oh, geez.
Oh, yeah. But then I did go to that self-check-in kiosk, and I'm like, this thing isn't going to work. It works perfectly fine. So I'm wondering if it was a victim of one of these attacks, because generally that's what you'll see. When that's a good barometer that you've probably been owned, everything's working better. They go in and fix all of your basic IT issues and then set up their persistent threat, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so back in March, a Pentagrid security researcher discovered he could easily bypass the self-check-in software running in kiosk mode on the terminal at the hotel he was staying at and access the underlying Windows desktop. And guess what? That Windows desktop all has local storage for all the customer details.
That's insane.
The research discovered that the application, get this, it hangs when entering a single quote on the reservation lookup system on the terminal. So it hangs, it gets locked up, and you touch the screen again, and it basically just asks you, do you want to end this task? You say yes, ends the task, and then you just have full access to the underlying Windows OS.
You know what happened? That the hacker was like, his name was like Brian O'Reilly, right? Like he's just typing
I was
it
thinking
in.
That.
Yeah.
I was thinking of like the Irish names, like, O'Grady, O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Would have been great, like, if the company who developed it was like, well, they had all these... red teamers come in and check for back doors, and anything more sophisticated would have been found out. This right here bypassed all their checks and balances.
I'm like, that's basic 101. Like, you always put an apostrophe in, right? You test for SQL injection. You just always start with an apostrophe.
Something. I'm telling you, maybe isn't it? Yeah, never mind. I can't say it. You just have to bleep it out anyway. So go on.
Hey, did they identify what the underlying Windows OS is? Please tell me it was XP. Please tell me it was XP.
I don't know. I don't think it did. It just said underlying Windows OS. Yeah, but these systems are used by 3,000 hotels in 25 countries, which collectively have about 500,000 rooms. And the application maker did not respond to a request for comment. They think that some of these kiosks might have been updated, some might not have. They're not sure. It's just that very obscure about if they've ever updated and who's been updated.
I still don't understand, like, why is the local data there? Like, this is why we have networks. This should just be like a dumb client, like, or did it just that the apostrophe just dump everything to the local?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess even if it is stored on a network or database somewhere in the cloud, that kiosk has like full access to it.
It's like that is zero multi-tenant. You know what I mean? Like,
totally. Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Now we know why anytime someone's like, we need to make a change to the kiosk, they're like, it will take 6 months to get that pushed out because you have to sync 500,000 hotel rooms and millions of customer names.
Yeah. It's a basic input validation. It's not even that you should just ban that. Like you said, there's legitimate last names that have apostrophes in it. So how can you make the application crash with that one character?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, when I first saw the the running order for this, I saw the hotel piece on there. This is not what I was expecting. I was thinking, I was like, oh, maybe this will be one of the something we haven't seen in a while. Back where like individuals would go in and ARP poison networks and grab people's passwords to their illicit activities, because the devil comes out of people when they're in hotels. But that problem has by and large been solved by kind of the same thing that our recent acquisition AirGap's doing, where they essentially would give every room like their own VLAN or every device. So it really segmented hotel networks. But this had absolutely nothing to do with that. Just wanted to go put that on record.
Brad's always selling
attacks.
It sounds to me like Brad was a frequent user back in the day of Cain and Abel, weren't you? Buddy?
Well, yeah. Well, actually, my nickname was Ettercap, but no. I actually managed a red team at the Department of Energy from 2007 to 10, where we travel around to a bunch of jerkwater locations, because that's where you build nuclear weaponry. You don't build it in downtown Manhattan. So yeah, I've stayed at some pretty interesting hotels, and when you're with a bunch of individuals that want to start a little early before we get on site,
a bunch of troublemakers.
Yeah.
Hey, so, let's rewind real quick. Like, what does your resume have on there? I didn't know you did anything with nuclear bombs there, Brad.
Oh, well, yeah. Good question.
DOE is energy, not defense.
Well, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. First 10 years of my career, though, because I do live in the D.C. metro area, and I am a native amongst transplants. I am actually from here. First 10 years was spent as working in a bunch of contract capacities for three agencies: the Defense Logistics Agency, then the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, which is the law enforcement arm of the Department of State, and then
the DSS.
Topped it off with DSS. Which, by the way, if you've ever seen the sequel to Fugitive, the one with Wesley Snipes and Robert Downey Jr. Downey Jr. is a
U.S.
DSS
Marshals
agent in that.
Yeah,
that is all BS. Like, there is no, the headquarters is not in New York City. I'll just say it. But anyway, the final tour of duty, which is the one I was referring to, I worked for 3 years at the NNSA, which is the National Nuclear Security Administration of DOE. And then, funny story, the reason I got out of that work, well, around that time, smartphones came out, and I said, I'm not locking my phone up anymore for 8 hours a day and then going to work. Welcome to the private industry, and I've been here ever since.
Well, we're happy to have you, brother. Yeah.
Now we have to have two phones again.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, I was astonished by the number of people carrying two phones, and it was like pockets of sales teams. Like, we all decided, unity, baby. So now we're all carrying two phones. I'm like, I'm just sticking to one.
We all unionized.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been asking people on my team who have opted for that approach. I'm like, we need to get you some kind of holster, but while we're at it, let me get you an MP3 player, a camera, a GPS, and a bunch of other things you can tack on there. Yeah. It's like
and a
utility
beeper.
belt,
modern day Batman.
Yeah, it's the Batman utility belt, exactly.
Yeah.
All I know is I'm going to make them regret they don't collect our text messages. They can, but they say that they don't. But I'm going to make them regret it. If they ever happen to open up a thread, that they're going to be like, Jesus Christ, what's wrong with this man?
Oh, there's that group chat with Glenn and Chris again.
Yeah.
All right, well, next time you're in a hotel, try that. Just put an apostrophe in the name field and see if you can crash the OS.
What I'm telling you, dude, I'm not trying to touch anything in a hotel. It's already disgusting. Like, I even have a separate bag for my shoes. So when I because I might bring some dress shoes, I have a separate bag for my shoes when I put them in my luggage, because I'm like, I don't want to know it's on this floor in Vegas at all. Yeah.
And so on that note, I mentioned traveled around to a lot of labs and the sort. So out in the middle of nowhere, maybe or not, in Carlsbad, New Mexico, there was a hotel with a sign that said "Queen mattresses for sale, $50." You can use your imagination for the rest of that one.
Wow.
You couldn't pay me $50 to take a queen mattress from a CD hotel.
What are you guys talking?
Any hotel for that matter.
When I was in my early years in college, that's how I got a majority of my furniture and decor. I was just driving around long enough, you'd find a couch or a mattress. Yeah.
That's true, yeah. Well, I guess poor college student is one thing. Tech professional, like we have the means now. We can afford a Casper or something.
You have
Sleep Number. I know Brian and Glenn are fancy. They have Sleep Number.
I don't have a Sleep Number yet. I want to get one. I just haven't had the time. All I'm doing is just sitting on a plane, contemplating life. So I have not bought one yet, but I will.
Do you have a Sleep Number, Brad?
Well, the Sleep Numbers, those are the ones where you can almost set the
You said the hardness
mattress.
of it.
Yeah, the hardness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I probably would have one if I didn't get divorced a couple of years ago, but my cat really doesn't complain too much. So, yeah, he deals with what I like. Yeah.
I guess that's one of those things. It's based on age. Glenn's the old man of the group, and it's like you spend, a third of your life in bed and asleep, so you should spend money where you spend most of your time. Like, for me, I have an expensive gaming mouse because I'm on the computer all day. Glenn, he spends it in bed all day. He buys an expensive mattress.
But this is important though too, because for instance, my uncle, I don't know how I know this, but it was obviously like a Thanksgiving or something. I mean, he'd be perfectly fine sleeping on a slab of concrete, But if it's too soft, he gets tremendous back pain, and so I could see where they would be quite helpful if you got two people that just aren't, compatible with that.
Yeah, getting old sucks. All right, for our second topic, the Dutch Military Intelligence and Security Service warned that the impact of a Chinese cyber espionage campaign unveiled earlier this year is, quote, much larger than previously known. They disclosed back in February this year that Chinese hackers were exploiting a critical FortiOS remote code execution vulnerability over a few months between 2022 and 2023 to deploy malware on vulnerable FortiGate network security appliances. During this so-called 0-day period, the actor infected 14,000 devices, and that number might have been up to 20,000 devices. So this didn't seem like one of those 0 days where the PLA goes in and they want to keep it a secret. They just sprayed this thing everywhere, and they got 20,000 infected devices on the edge.
Man, that's a lot of devices. Good job, Fortinet, for actually selling that piece of crap security device to a bunch of people. lowest bidder.
Yeah, exactly. You see something like this, and it really starts. I mean, I'm not going to get too frustrated and go on one of my diatribes here, which I know you two have seen me do. But again, I mean, there's a quote sometimes I inject in my presentations. I think it was from Michelangelo, and it's excellent. It says, our greatest fear is not that our aim is too high and that we miss it. It's that it's too low and we hit it. That right there is too low. Right? It's just, I mean, you almost like look at it and it's like, now, and look, if anyone has any cognitive dissonance about, maybe the biggest software vendor on the world having their own, patch holiday every month, you're going to have to figure that out on your own. But, it's almost like, hey, we need to get this product out on the street now to provide protection for our customers. I mean, it just kind of screams of like, minimal, minimal viable product. Minimal viable
MVP.
Product gets you maximum security exposure, folks. Okay? I mean, this is just another case in point here. Yeah, unbelievable.
And even when we were watching some of the talks this week and they were talking about the benefits of zero trust and zero attack surface, and I know the speakers are trying to be diplomatic, like we don't want to call out any specific vendor, but like, come on, at some point you can't avoid this. Every time you say some firewall vendor had a vulnerability, and the audience should say, do you know how little that narrows this down?
Yeah, because literally every firewall vendor has had that.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we say that to kind of obfuscate. It's like, hey, I wonder if he's talking about Microsoft's TMG. We got to check those out in our environment.
Oh my gosh, I'll never forget. Like TMG's been deprecated for like forever, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember talking to a customer years ago, and they were trying to get off of TMG, and I was like, I never even heard of this thing. And I'm like,
is that old threat management gateway?
Yeah.
Well, it had a different name before that. I can't remember the name of it. And yeah, that one, all they did was just rebrand it. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, it was the same thing. And those have been sitting on network, and they're in the oddest places, like DMZs. They maybe even for network seg. I mean, it's it's pretty funny.
Is that like Entra Access now or something? I'm sure that's been probably.
I wonder how it was
pivoted or rebranded it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was talking with a customer, and it was already 3 years of end of life, like end of support. I think I was like, "How the heck do you guys still have this? And why is it not bringing you like crazy pain?" So it was it was Microsoft Security and acceleration server before, ISA
Yes,
server.
Yeah. Now, the funny thing is, hey, Chris, I want to know this. Like when Beach was telling them that if the guy was kicking the other guy's foot under the table, like insinuating, well, don't tell him that we're going to probably repurpose it with a Sidewinder we found in our closet.
I've learned to not cast any aspersions anymore, because before it was like, ooh, man, you guys like to make some bad decisions, and then it's just like, yeah, they never call back, so they're always going to keep it. No, they went with the vendor that took the high road, went a little less judgmental.
Yeah, the last thing we need is a vendor coming in here and pointing out all of our shortcomings. Yeah, I mean, that is unacceptable.
So what's interesting about this is like now that we know they came out, found a remote code execution, like that's just like your entry point in. I almost feel like if you've done, let's say 14,000 devices, right, somewhere in that number, your playbook has to be the exact same of like, once you're in, like, what do you do, right? And so that should become, is that a TTP, or what would we call that? Like some type of fingerprinting of like how this person would bounce around.
That's where things like MITRE ATT&CK, like mapping it to a framework, would really help. So you get initial access, you pop this 48 device, this Fortinet firewall, and then what do? You move laterally.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, this right here, like one of our other colleagues, I was talking to him about MITRE ATT&CK, and he made a funny comment. He was like, "Yeah, MITRE ATT&CK is excellent. I mean, it's helping to protect you from yesterday's attacks, or tomorrow for yesterday's attacks." But a lot of these attacks, like this one right here, MITRE would look at this and be like, well, we don't need to add any new tactics or techniques or sub-techniques to this. This is, this is just old hat right here. I mean, that's the way I'm kind of looking at a lot of these, like publications that come out today. I mean, there's nothing new here. So again, general hygiene, and maybe updating our solution evaluation criteria would have, probably mitigated this, right?
Dude, my favorite story about MITRE is Christopher Young. I met up with him in Montreal, and I was like, yeah, man, like, how are things going? What made you do this? He's like, oh, I didn't get to tell you. So put in all this effort, and in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, like we can highlight what we do, and then more importantly, what we don't do, right? Because we can't boil the ocean. And so when he turned it over to, say somebody on the team, be like, oh, this is unacceptable. We can't, like, we don't want to show this because there's all these things we don't solve for. And he goes, that's the point, right? Like,
that's the point. We're not, yeah. You're missing the point.
Like, we're trying to establish, trust with our customers, and that we know what the hell we're doing and what we're talking about, and to help them identify the gaps, because maybe they solve a lot of stuff as Zscaler, maybe they solve a lot of stuff identity, but maybe there's 6 things that they can't do with any of their tools. Which way did they go? And I was like, yeah, that's just wild. They're like, can you make it a less offensive color of the stuff we don't cover? I'm like, oh my gosh.
Not red.
Yeah.
Blaring red. We don't do this.
Yeah.
It's funny, too, because I worked on that project. I still work on that. Well, it's not a project. I mean, it's more operational work now. It's a program. And yeah, one of the tenets of it was to, I mean, it's funny. I don't, the way I kind of tell that story is just do a web search sometime of MITRE ATT&CK 100%. You'll see some pretty colorful, embedded images out there on certain people's websites where, oh yeah, MITRE ATT&CK, we help customers meet 120% of it, and it's like, wow, who put this together? Like a bunch of product marketers that were in some kind of fancy laboratory or something. So that's
marketing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I'm familiar with one of the vendors you're talking about. When I saw that, I was instantly skeptical about it. And then when you actually dive in, it says, okay, well, we have 100% of MITRE ATT&CK coverage for this one very specific group using one very specific attack method. And even though the headline says we have 100% coverage for MITRE
right, it's
ATT&CK.
not like they were being interviewed by the New York Times or something, so they misquoted themselves is what they're saying.
Yeah, it's just a blog on their corporate website.
Architecture, baby.
Yeah. I think it's important. That's the whole defense in depth argument. No one vendor should or would be able to cover 100%. That's why you have defense in depth, that you have multiple layers, multiple controls, and hopefully the aggregate would keep you safe.
Yeah, because if it's one vendor, it's like, hey, these guys have assured me I can buy everything that they, peddle out on the streets, and it'll cover everything. That's defense in depth. No, it's not. That's expense in depth. Okay. Yeah. There's a difference between the two.
I'm stealing that. Expense in depth.
Right.
All right, for our third topic, we're actually going to call an audible. We're going to skip the Google story. I think I promised Kobe we'd wait for him to talk about that. And Deech pulled an audible on me and is switching up our topic 4. So I'm moving our topic 4 to topic 3.
Okay. So I think we can all probably share maybe the cool story of the week. And so mine came, I think, Tuesday night at a dinner. And we're in a round table. We had like 30 people there. And this one gentleman, badass beard. I mean, I was envious, guys. I'm not going to lie. He starts talking, and I was like, oh, you're not from around here, are you? He's like, no, I'm actually from Iraq. And I was like, and so just kind of asking questions. And I was like, so like how, like, tell me about your whole immigration process, right? He's like, I basically served in the U.S. military. I helped. I was a translator. And I was like, oh, like that movie, like The Covenant? He's like,
a translator or an interpreter, Brian?
Interpreter, you're right. Yeah. I almost want to say that he was translating, though. I think he used the word translate.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and he goes, yeah. He goes,
Covenant.
Yeah. He goes, exactly like that movie. I mean, as far as what the job was entailed, he didn't carry somebody for 180 miles or whatever it was. But it was crazy because I was like, oh, and he did it for like 4 years. And I said, oh, man, like that, this asking some questions and, why did you do it? And basically he's like, hey, I was basically there to help my family, right, get to a better place and to help my people stay safe. Like I believe that what the U.S. was doing was good, and we wanted to have a good time. So it was really interesting perspective. And then I said, man, I was like, I'm so happy that you made it here, because in that movie they made it seem like nobody got back over to the U.S. Zero interpreters. And he goes, I can't speak on the Afghanis. He goes, but for us, the Iraqis, is that there's like 100,000 of us that actually made it over. So if you just think about that scale of people, like that's the 100,000 that lived. Like he had lots of friends that died because they had probably the worst job in the U.S. military, right? Which is like go up and ask people that hate the people that you're working with, including you, without a gun, right? And so like he was just like,
you're a traitor and betraying your people. And,
Exactly. So, he kind of put his head down. He's like, yeah, we lost a lot of good people. I go, so he goes, but for me, it was easy. He's like, we went through, and at the end of the thing, after the 4 years, he's like, I went up to the commander and they signed off that, yes, they actually did this. And then they did a background check. And then I came to America. As soon as I landed, had a green card. And then after 10 years, they made me a citizen. So there's this wild experience. He goes, now my whole family's here. And, he goes, you'd be surprised. Like there's this huge pockets of people, and I've seen it in Scottsdale, Arizona. But he was saying in L.A., in Chicago, New York, a lot of places in Texas is where they immigrated to. So, and it was kind of neat because one of the customers, a different customer next to me, he's like, dude, this is like the American dream right here. Like this, like you actually lived it and you're doing it. And like I don't know, I thought it was pretty phenomenal. And what was funny is his name was Ahmed, which is the same name as the guy that was portrayed in that movie.
In The Covenant,
so, In The Covenant, yeah. So for anyone listening, if you didn't see the movie The Covenant, I definitely recommend it. It was a good movie.
That was a good one, yeah. Was this Ahmed, he works in IT now? I guess that's why he was there.
Yep. So
he's a pretty high-ranking person in the IT organization.
I'd have to double check his title. I would say I have no idea, to be honest with you. But yeah, very bright gentleman. And, there was, he was definitely Midwest. So I think he was in Houston. So he was with that group of people. So you can imagine the companies that were there. So.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah, like you said, American dream. You help the U.S. You should be allowed to come here legally, go through the process, and then be able to live out your American dream.
Yeah, like literally put his life on the line, right? I don't think there's a better fit for someone that actually qualifies for it. Not easy. So I'm curious. Did you guys have any? Like, it doesn't have to be like that, but like, did you guys have any interesting conversations with people when you got to know them a little?
I had lunch and dinner with the same customer, and collectively spent hours together, and you get to know them. I never met them in person, hours, through Zoom and stuff, but in person. So I found out one of the people I work with on the customer side was in the U.S. Navy. And I guess when you talk to anybody in the Navy, they've got stories. And one of the things came up, and I said, well, I was just curious, like, well, what's the most accurate submarine movie? He worked in the Navy, worked on a submarine. So what's the most accurate submarine movie? He's like, actually, Hunt for Red October was really, really accurate. He said, except for that sci-fi Caterpillar drive stuff, but for the most part, Life on a Sub was that was accurate from a technical standpoint on how the submarines worked. And then he said, actually, for Life on the Sub, the most accurate movie was Down Periscope, which I think was like a Tyler Perry comedy movie from the late 90s. And he just says, yeah, there's just so much hijinks going on. You get hundreds of dudes trapped in a confined area for 6 months at a time. Like, you're gonna get some hijinks for sure. Like, he was telling me one time he stole his captain's uniform, and the captain's like this 6'7" huge dude, and then there's another guy on the ship that's like a 5'1" guy, and they like swapped uniforms. So the short guy was wearing this really big uniform, and the captain had to wear this like really tiny uniform, and just like mess with each other.
Yeah, I'm like, you know what I'm thinking of? And this might be an esoteric reference for some people, but the lead singer of Talking Heads back in the day, that was kind of his shtick. He would wear this oversized suit, David Byrne. Like, so like, that's what I'm picturing now is that. See, I didn't have any stories about that. You know what? It was like, all we did was talk about like security transformation and zero trust with customers.
You nerd, you're supposed to get to know people. I love it.
Yeah. Well, now one thing though, and I mentioned this to you guys before. I don't know. Like, I guess we had some kind of scheduling software that it didn't sound like anyone else had this issue, so it wasn't systemic. But for me, it was pretty much blocking out all of my free time and showing my available time. When I was already preoccupied. Like, so, like, the 3 or so meetings that were scheduled, but more importantly, my breakout session. So trying to mitigate that on the fly in real time, that was fun. And look, that's one of the reasons, Chris, why we're doing this now and not there, because you guys had to rightfully go out of band to get a hold of me. And and just trying to kind of mitigate everything that happened there. And look, it's possible that it's my fault, but I'm not ready to identify myself when assigning blame for this just yet.
I will definitely say
it's a funny
that,
way of saying it wasn't me.
Yeah. The Shaggy defense once again is brought up. I just realized someone from Zscaler HR is probably listening to this podcast, and he's like, Brian called out a minority and asked them how they immigrated here to the U.S. in front of 29 customers. We need to have an HR moment. I know it sounds like I promise it came from a good place and it was well received. And it was a really cool story.
It's like you want to know what their background is and what their story is. I'm sure it was fine.
Yeah, like sometimes I feel like I'm a weirdo. I'm always like searching for something. Like, I feel like you sit down to meet with people and they're just like, oh, you have your hand in my pocket trying to get my money, and I'm like, today I don't really think like that. I just want to kind of get to know you. And then we can talk about cool stuff over Zoom or in person in your office. But like, we're going to be hanging out here, like rock and roll. Let's go. So
build that rapport.
That I did have a funny story on. One of the customers said something to me, and this is good because it's something I just try to do. And a little bit further background about me: I was a Zscaler customer for almost 6 years before joining almost 4 years ago. So I feel like I've been here 10 years. But sometimes in an unwritten mission of mine is, I'm going to try to make an impact in this role. In doing what I would have wanted, I can't say expected as a customer. And you know what? Somebody, towards the end of one of my customer engagements, they said something. They're like, you're not like most of the people we talk to in these kind of sessions. And I was like, well, how so? What do you mean by that? It's like, you're beyond transparent, which don't get me wrong. We appreciate that. And I'm like, yeah, well, SaaS companies kind of gave the explosion to something known as a chief trust officer, if a true thing, if you look it up, just what companies need, another CTO, right? But it was kind of born out of the whole shared responsibility model. And I kind of I didn't know what to say to it other than thank you. And I said, it's got to be kind of weird for you that I'm sitting here, building trust while peddling a product called Zero Trust, right?
Yeah.
So you just started laughing at that. It's kind of the way we ended it. So that's my big customer interaction story. That was kind of cool. Yeah.
We're building a belief, right, instead of trust at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other story, I don't think this guy will mind if I tell it, but same guy in the Navy on a submarine, and they're operating in an area where they're technically not supposed to, as the U.S. military does. And I guess some guy was doing his laundry, and apparently these laundry machines inside a submarine don't have start-stop timers. Like, you have to set your watch, go back, turn it off manually, and then I guess he fell asleep, left it in too long, and started a fire in the sub, which, if you don't know, a fire in a very confined space with lots of people is very, very dangerous. And they were able to put out the fire, but the whole sub was like filled with smoke. And since the submarine's operating somewhere it shouldn't be, they can't surface and expose themselves to vent the smoke out. So he said for like weeks, the sub was just filled with smoke. So they had to walk around with these gas masks, like the whole Chernobyl gas mask and everything. They had to like plug into some vent or something to get fresh oxygen. So for weeks, the entire sub had to do this because this guy fell asleep and left his laundry in the dryer a little too long. And he was not well liked on the sub after that.
I see an opportunity here. What could mitigate that? Let's see. Screen door on a submarine? Nah.
Probably not.
I don't know. Yeah. It's like...
So let me ask you guys. Do you guys know someone? I think his name is. I'm looking at his picture. I might not have the right guy, but he's got his name is James Sanderoff. He works at Zscaler. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I see. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. AKA the Mountain. Are we talking about the same person?
Yeah, I think we are. I think we are. Yeah.
Oh my God! Like, so someone came up. They're like, "Hey, you need to go over here and talk to that customer." I'm like, "They're right by James." I'm like, "I don't know who James is." They're like, "You see that dude right there with the giant?" I was like, "Oh my God, yeah, I see it." So I walk over there, do my thing, and then later that night, as I'm going back to my room, I see him. I say, "Hey, James, how's it going?" And again, like, he's just makes me feel small, right? I think he must be 6'10", maybe. I have no idea. Anyways, I'm like, all right, it's time to say goodbye. I have to shake this meat wallet's hand, right? Like, just like I'm like, I got to go in hard, and so I go in for the handshake. I am 110% trying to crush his hand as much as I can, and he's like, "Oh, someone's got some muscles." Like, he's just like looking at my arm, and we're just
like, that's
we're
cute.
We're in this deadlock, and I'm squeezing as hard as I can. And he squeezed harder, and I'm trying to squeeze harder, and like, it was the world's longest handshake. It was probably a minute 19 seconds of just like this thing, and I finally was like, "Oh," and then I walked away, and my forearm was like locked up. It was so sore. I was like, "This dude." Like, I didn't want to back down, but I was not going to win either. So
I actually have worked with him a fair bit over the years. Now, granted, I met him during COVID, so you meet a lot of people online, and their Zoom profile picture kind of gives you an idea of what they look like. So when I met him in Carbon for the first time, first of all, I didn't know who he was because his picture does not tell that story.
Yeah.
And then when I found out who it was, I remember, thank God I didn't shake his hand, but I was like, oh my God, like, where are you from? Norland? I mean, He was huge. I was just like, yeah.
I was shaking, like, I don't know, a bushel of bananas is the best way to describe it. Like, this big old banana meat bucket. I don't even know how to say whatever that.
Were you an extra on Game of Thrones?
He could have been the stunt double for the actual giant. Like, that
mountain.
dude is a beast. Super nice guy, though. But what was funny,
super nice guy.
Yeah. I walked by, and he was there with Brian Redding, and he was knew him from back in the day. Did this acquisition. Now he's back.
Boomeranged, yeah. Yeah,
boomerang. And we're sitting there talking. At this point, it's probably really late. It's coming up towards 1 o'clock, maybe midnight. No, probably closer to midnight. And I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And Brian's like, "Man, people have been buying me shot after shot. I'm done drinking." And so I'm there for like 5 minutes. I'm like, "All right, Brian, let's one more shot. This is with me. I haven't drank all night. I'm just being a jerk." He's like, all right. And then James is like, "I'll pay for it." And I was like, "I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make him drink. I just want to see if I could get him to drink, even though he said he was done drinking." And he was all up for it. And then James is like, "Man," called me a couple names. He's like, "Yeah, only you would come by, suggested we take a shot, and then back out of it." That's a healthy
habit to encourage people to do.
Hey, so you said something there that got me thinking. Another good story here, and this might actually be a good tactic for some of you out there. whenever you have a user conference, it's based in Vegas. It is what it is. But I just, I was going from, and this was during our reception, and then it spilled over into a bar in the casino. But just getting a lot of people, talking to customers and colleagues alike, and I can't tell you, everyone saw that I didn't have a drink, so they kept saying, "Hey, do you want to?" I like it when they're like, "Hey, do you want me to buy you a drink?" And we're at like our party. I'm like, "Hey, thanks."
Yeah.
But but after a while, I just, I didn't want to drink. I just, because I don't know who I'm going to talk to, right? Or who take pictures of, like Jay's, photographer. But one of my colleagues, I don't remember who it was, maybe Dan Shelton or someone. He had just finished drinking a beer. It was like an Amstel Light. I grabbed that bottle and started pimping around for the next 2 hours with that empty in my hand. No one asked me if I wanted to drink the rest of the night. They just wanted to talk to me, and it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they say. If that keeps happening, order a club soda with lime in it, and people think it's vodka tonic or something.
Oh, or find an empty beer bottle and just
from Dan Sheldon. I'm sure there are plenty around him.
Right.
All right, for our last topic, it'll be a rotating topic every week. This week, we're going to talk about a somewhat boneheaded move by a British man. Since we have Brad on, this one is partly legal and one part cybersecurity related. A British man is suing Apple, the iPhone maker, because he blames them for his wife finding out that he's been soliciting the services of prostitutes for years, leading to his eventual divorce. The British man thought that he was being clever by using iMessage and routinely deleting the messages off his phone. Well, that's a good way to hide an extramarital affair. He did not realize that all of his iMessages were being synced to the family's iMac, where his wife found the years of messages stored there. Needless to say, the wife quickly filed for divorce, and the British man was forced to pay her more than $6 million in the divorce. He believes that Apple doesn't make it clear enough to customers that messages can be synchronized between other Apple devices on the same account, even if they've been deleted off the iPhone.
So, Chris, every time you say words weirdly, our listenership just falls off the mat. It's British. I don't know what the heck you're saying. British. Like, is this British? Like, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the one thing that jumps out at me about that, I mean, he was forced to pay $6 million. Does this British guy, is his grandmother possibly on their currency over there? Like, I mean, that just seems to be a lot of money, for something like this. But I mean, yeah, this is a really fascinating story, actually. I mean, because what are we doing here? We're trying to balance privacy with, data continuity or whatever. But it's funny, when I first saw this, I started thinking of something that I use to kind of solve a security problem. So when I was a Zscaler customer, I was a CISO of a global law firm, and I had a lot of visibility into data flows, and I think that's probably the right thing to do, which is, hey, rather than start implementing or enforcing a bunch of preventive controls, let me understand how data moves, how we generate revenue. And then one of the interesting things about law firms is no one, and I mean no one, gets sued more than law firms, right? So you got some pretty interesting, discovery, processes in place to, retain client emails and sort. But what I started noticing was a lot of people were forwarding work product or litigation materials from their business email to their personal one. And
it's a big
I was
no-no.
like, look, I tell them, look, I know you're doing this. I don't, look, I need to work at home. And, the corporate device is too restrictive to do this and that. Or, you get all these kind of things. I'm like, that's fine. But let me tell you something you'll understand. When that client sues us and your personal mailbox becomes discoverable, be ready for that.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't. I'm never doing that again, Brad. So, yeah, it's the best control I could have come up with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing more whiny than developers are doctors and lawyers, I swear. These guys. Yeah. But that's a great way of doing it. Yeah.
Well, so before I got to the law firm, I actually was a CISO of a hospital here in the DC metro area, a 500-bed hospital. And the biggest difference between doctors and lawyers, one of them thinks they know everything. The other one knows they know everything. And it's just, it's a lot of fun.
So for this,
I used to know everything, and then I turned 12,
Yeah, so for this British guy, how about, why sneak around? It should just ended this a long time ago, man. Like what were you thinking, bro?
Well, you want to pay the $6 million. He didn't have a prenup, is my
$6 million.
guess.
I mean, like just look right off the bat, we have to assume he's got a $12 million fortune.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't know.
She gets half. Yeah. Actually, I don't know what the rules are in the UK.
Yeah, I don't know either.
If it's like communal property here in the US. But somebody in my circle, I won't out them, but somebody in my circle, this exact same thing happened to him. But he was on the receiving side. So he's an Apple fanatic, everything Apple, iPhone, iPad, Mac, AirPod, everything Apple. And then I guess his wife, now ex-wife, was having an affair, did the same thing, was messaging on her phone, deleted the messages, but it synced to the communal iMac, and I guess she had to log out or something, and then he found all these messages through the iMessage on the iMac versus the ones on her phone, and ended up in divorce as well.
He's like Django Unchained. He signed his own freedom papers, man.
Yeah, totally.
Brad gets it.
I totally get it. Something else I get too, Apple products. Yeah, I own a bunch of them because that's I don't know what to buy my my mom or my sister-in-law for a holiday. I do know technology, so I own all kinds of iPhones, iMacs in the store. It is, and usually I have to wait for them to wear down before I get them something clever again for holidays. But one thing that it's weird for me. I actually have an Android phone, but I love OS X and Mac OS, and I'm not as much of a fan of iOS. When are they going to marry these two? And I know this is way off topic, but it's an important one.
They're pretty close to being married at this point.
Yeah, the iPad OS, the universal apps, that's one step closer. I don't think they'll ever...
No one's ever had a MacBook where they had touchscreen capabilities, or something like that.
I think that's intentional because they want to keep the iPad line separate from the MacBook line, because the lines are sort of blurred. I want to keep my screen
clean, too. Yeah.
We had a Windows device that had a touchscreen. It was useless. It's like every once in a while.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah. No. When Windows 8 came out, Windows 8 was supposed to be the touchscreen OS, and everybody hated it. And then they switched to 8.1 and brought the start menu back.
Yeah, if I had like an iMac that was touchscreen capable, like one of those big 27-inch ones, I would, like every month I would like grab residual from it and submit it to 23andMe or something. I mean, it's just, those are disgusting. Those touchscreen capable things. Yeah.
So it's sort of funny or interesting related to this week is Apple's WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference, and one of the features that they're announcing for iOS 18, which is the next major revision of the iPhone software, is you can now control your iPhone from your Mac. So if you upgrade to the new Mac OS, you upgrade to the new iPhone OS, like you now have a remote control over your phone, which seems good. Like I like handoff. I like copying something from the phone and pasting it on the computer, and I like all the seamlessness. You can start a message on the phone and then finish it on the computer. But this gets into the security realm is if somebody owns your Mac, they could in theory own your iPhone as well. So even if you have let's say you have your iPhone in lockdown mode, like does this turn off when it's in lockdown mode? And can they just get access to your Mac to get access to your phone? So there's some questions around that.
It's almost like airdropping access authorizations everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like really, really great convenience features, but horrible from a security perspective.
I think the coolest thing is like you can like password or Face ID some of the internal apps, but also if you're on your phone, it's eye tracking you. But if somebody else comes by and they start looking at it, you can close the app.
Like shoulder surf.
Yeah, the shoulder surfing stuff. I think that's actually a pretty cool feature.
Yeah, and now they're gonna have per app PIN codes or Face ID too as well. So even if you hand something I'll show someone a picture, hand on my phone, like, hey, don't go to that app, or you're worried about that.
Yeah. Dude,
they're really breaking the bounds of technological advancement. I mean, what's next? I mean, we're going to see Mac OS available in hypervisors?
No, they're selling too many Mac Minis for that.
There's one RSM. I won't call him out by name unless he wants to be called out. We can divulge it next week. But I had texted him because I think one night I had 3 or 4 dinners to go to and I didn't make it to him. So I had sent him a message. I was like, bro, I'm not going to be able to make it, blah, blah, blah. And then at 1:47 in the morning, I receive a text message from him and it says, it's all good. I just want to give your big old bald head a kiss. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then the next text message comes through was not for me. It was meant for his wife. And so then the next morning I wake up, I'm like, what the F, dude? And I didn't know it was for his wife, but like what came through He goes, dude, I'm dying. I just sent it over to my wife. She saw the screen. She's like, I can't imagine what this dude is probably thinking of you right now.
So that's why you have the unsend feature on the iMessage.
Oh yeah.
He said he was so impaired that he didn't realize he thought he was texting his wife, and it wasn't until 8 hours later.
Yeah. So my former supervisor here, Kavitha Mariappan, shortly after I started working there, I was still married. And I was sending something to my wife, and I was talking to her at the same time. She may or may not have a screenshot where I do profess my love for her. Kavitha, that is.
Yeah. At the same time, it's kind of sad because you were married, you're professing your love, and then you got divorced.
Yeah. It was very early on too. So she obviously knew me, but knows me a lot better now. 4 years later on, and Yeah, that's usually kind of, hey, can you do this for me? Yeah, I really don't think I can. Well, I got a screenshot, though, that I'm just going to go ahead and post on our conference. I'm like, you know what? I got time. Yeah.
All right, just to close this topic, we're not advocating for extramarital affairs here, but if you might find yourself in maybe an abusive partner situation, here are some OPSEC pointers. Use Signal and use disappearing messages because, again, even if it syncs between desktop and phone, if it disappears in Signal off one, it disappears off them all. If using iMessage, sign in with a different account or just turn off iMessage syncing altogether. And lastly, you can use eSIM on the same phone and make sure you send messages from the phone number and not the iCloud account.
Hey, by the way, on that Signal feature, I had a customer recently who's very security conscious mentioned to me, hey, by the way, I'm starting to use a new app. It's called Session. I think it does the exact same thing, but knowing this guy and what he does, it's probably used by more of the dark net people. But I looked into it, just went to their page, and it looks like it's got all the functionality of Signal. But I think what's very important for some people is the what's the acronym?
Know your customer.
Know your customer. Yeah. So he didn't have to register with his real name on this. So he enjoyed that aspect of it. I think with Signal, I think you do, because if you have to provide a phone number, you're not.
That's an identifier.
KYC. Yeah.
So that was a big hang up on Signal. As of, I think, 1 or 2 months ago, Signal does not require a unique phone number anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
They can use usernames now.
That would make sense. I talked to this guy about 2 months ago. So
Yeah, so now Signal supports that. Yeah.
I think you're going to tell me that he was old and he was trying to say Signal, but just got his words confused. It's like Sessions,
well, it's one of those where, again, you're in the position you're in. It's a customer. They're always right. You're like, yeah, let me go ahead and look into that. I'm like, I'll be damned. He is right. There is an app out there called that, and it purports itself as a secure messenger. So
yeah,
I do not work for them, and they're not giving me any money.
I know. We need to get a sponsorship.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we continue to get great comments about our dad joke of the week.
Dad joke of the week.
This week, our guest Brad is up.
Oh boy, yeah. So you know what? I knew that this was coming to me. So I put in at least a good minute and a half of research here. So ready when you are, but right to the point. So I started a boat building business in my attic, and sales are going through the roof.
There you go.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah. I mean, that's up there with some of the ones I've heard. So feel good about that one.
You should.
All right, to wrap things up, check-in terminals are hacked with a single quote. Chinese hackers infected 20,000 Fortinet networking appliances. Find out your customers' backstories and check your iMessage sync settings. That's all I have for this week. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Find us on LinkedIn. Links will be in the description. Follow us on Instagram at PEBCAK Podcast. Thank you to all listeners and subscribers. Rate us 5 stars in the iTunes Store and Spotify, and left us a review. We appreciate you all spreading the word to help grow the show. The best way to find us is to search for the PEBCAK Podcast on your favorite podcast listening app. For my co-host Brian Deitch and our guest Brad Moldenhauer, I'm Chris Louie. Thanks for listening. We'll see you all next week, and as always, have a nice day.
Bye, Felicia.
Bye,
Have a nice day.